Okay. Well, not good, but. Okay, so then I would like to introduce our speaker. She came from Danville and she needs to go back tonight. It's almost a 3-hour drive, so we want to give her time to speak. So any announcements, we're going to hold that to the end so she can get going. Anyway, we are very, very pleased tonight to have a woman who is an expert on Agenda 21, which many of you are here to hear about. She just came from Arizona, where she met with the legislatures there concerning Agenda 21. She has worked with Dick Morris, and she is the leader of the East Bay Tea Party. Please welcome Heather Goss.
Thank you. I'm down here with Marco Rubio moment here. And I need water. I don't even have water. I don't know why my throat is so dry. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for having me here. And I really appreciate it. I speak about Agenda 21 2 or 3 times a week, all over the state, Nevada, Arizona, wherever. And because it's the truth. And really, I just want to help wake others up. That's all I do. I do this for virtually no money. I spend 10 hours a day probably doing research every day because I'm concerned about the direction of our country. You'll get this on film though. I'm not running for office, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I do tons of research on this, and the thing is a few years ago, I would never have even thought anything about Agenda 21. I wouldn't have any idea. I mean, I was never a political activist. I was a network engineer for 17 years. I traveled the world and taught people how to design and build wide area networks. That's what I did. But, you know, looking at the shape that our country is in, I started digging in and trying to figure out, you know, how I could turn this thing around, what I could do as an individual. And one thing led to another, and things just weren't adding up, you know. You start going, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? You know, things that just didn't make sense. You're thinking, I'm not that smart, but I can figure out they should be doing this. And it's that pit of your stomach where you don't know why, it doesn't add up, that I realized that's when it's kind of leaning towards an Agenda 21 moment or issue, because it's kind of like a connect the dots picture. You have those connect the dots pictures, and until you connect most of the dots, you don't know what the picture really is. So you don't have an idea what this big plan is, because there is a plan. There's a plan being implemented. It's a global plan with a local action plan associated with it. And that's what Agenda 21 is. It's the agenda for the 21st century. Sustainability is a term that's used to describe a piece of Agenda 21. Our sustainable, well, what we're told sustainability is and what it really means when you look at the legislation that's being implemented are 2 different things. And that's the dark side of sustainability. I mean, at this point, we have sustainable yogurt, right? And I don't think people really know what sustainability really means. I mean, we think we know what it means. We want it to mean a certain thing. We want it to mean to preserve for future generations. We want to conserve and be mindful. But that's not what it's about. United Nations Agenda for the 21st Century off of their website shows the local Agenda 21 planning guide and their actual document. It's 40 chapters. It describes a global to local comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems, governments, and mayors groups. So this is off of their website. Now in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, Agenda 21 was adopted by 179 nations. George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. signed onto it. It wasn't ratified by Congress. So one of the arguments is, well, it's a non-binding treaty, no big deal, nothing to see here. Well, that's true. It's not been ratified by Congress. But according to Obama, Congress doesn't matter. Right? I mean, that basically he said it doesn't matter whether Congress wants to go along with it. I mean, I'm not being funny. That's what he said. He said he's going to get everything pushed through executive order. And so, you know, if it's not a non-binding treaty, that's fine, but it's happening anyway. It's being injected into every level of our country because we're, like I said, we have sustainable yogurt now. 1993 executive order by Clinton of 12852 created the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So they adopted it in 92, then they created the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and their job was to make sure that the principles of Agenda 21 and sustainable development were injected into every facet of our government structure. Now here's an example here's a federal registry entry from the EPA. It says the Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program is a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan of Action on Sustainable Development. And it also says that the EPA grant program intends to further the vision and goals of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So this is part of our federal registry. Now, the term sustainable development was actually defined in 1987 at the UN World Commission on Environment and Development through the Brundtland Commission, and it came out of a report called Our Common Future. And the definition that they want you to believe or to think that it means is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that sounds good. But when we start looking at legislation, it's a little different when it's implemented. Now, David Rockefeller of the Club of Rome says, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill, and then the real enemy is humanity itself. So the environment is used to scare us into giving up our liberties and our freedoms, and to use it as a catalyst for change. Maurice Strong, another nice guy, founder of the UN Environment Program, says that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, if they take my hamburger away from me, fossil fuels, appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are unsustainable. And isn't it the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? And isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? These are the people that are backing the United Nations agenda for the 21st century. Now, we sent a delegate to Rio Plus 20, which was in June, the 20-year anniversary of the Rio Summit. Debbie Bacigalupi, who's from Siskiyou County, you may know her, she may have spoken here. She was interviewing people from all over the world, because in our country, if you talk about Agenda 21, if you talk about the truth here, you're called a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, right? Well, she interviewed people and said, do you know, from Africa, from all over the world, and said, have you heard about Agenda 21? Do you know about this non-governmental organization, this NGO called ICLEI, the International Council for Local and Environmental Initiatives? It's pushing this into our local cities and governments. And they're like, well, yeah, of course we know. Of course we know what Agenda 21 is. Of course we know who ICLEI is. They're very powerful. They thought she was joking. They thought she was joking because it's common knowledge in every other country except our own. The point of what they were arguing about at the United Nations Earth Summit this past June was how they were going to redistribute the wealth of the American public. They weren't talking about saving the planet and the environment. They were arguing about how they were going to get a global tax applied on us, and carbon tax, so that they could redistribute the wealth and create more wealth in their own countries by redistributing our wealth. And that's basically it. I mean, if you think about it, the United Nations, we have one vote. We're one vote, along with every other country. And some of these countries are very, very small. And basically what's happening is they're ganging up and voting for free stuff, and we're paying for everything. And so sure, they're going along with a lot of this. Now, Gary Lawrence, who's on the President's Council for Sustainable Development, says participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy-fixated groups and individuals in our society who fear one world government and a UN invasion of the United States, through which our individual freedoms would be stripped away, and would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy undertaking local Agenda 21. So we call our process something else. We call it comprehensive planning, growth management, smart growth. Dave Foreman from Earth's First says we have to reclaim the roads, plowed land, halt dam construction, tear down existing dams, free shackled rivers. He says my three main goals would be reduce human population to about 100 million, destroy the industrial infrastructure, and then return everything else to wilderness. These are the people that are promoting Agenda 21. Now again, I look for facts because, you know, people tell me don't talk about Agenda 21. I say, okay, well then tell Nancy Pelosi to stop talking about it. Because in 1992, there's a C-SPAN video of HCON Res 353, which is the UN Biodiversity bill that was introduced by Nancy Pelosi. And in this video, which I'm not going to show you because I don't want to hear Nancy Pelosi. We just don't have that kind of time, but this is her before she had Botox, and she's talking about Agenda 21. They must have mentioned Agenda 21 40 times. Okay, so you guys can Google it. This is a C-SPAN video. You can find it yourself, and you can see that they know about this. Congress knows about it. They've been working on this. This is not a secret. Now they indoctrinate our children to, you know, hate America, to think that human beings are the problem, and we need to somehow, you know, repent for that, or, you know, we're destroying the planet, and we humans are bad. I found a book called Rescue Mission Planet Earth. It's a children's edition of Agenda 21, and this was published in 1994, so this has been going on a long time. And this is, keep in mind it's a children's book. There's Boutros Ghali, who wrote the foreword. There's a page in here, Chainsaw Massacre. So our children are supposed to think that we've destroyed our forests. You know, I remember years ago thinking or hearing about the spotted owl. You know, I didn't put that all together because I lived in the Bay Area, you know, but I remember the spotted owl. I remember hearing about the spotted owl as a teenager and thinking, you know, we had to save the forest, got to save the spotted owl and all of this stuff. And we've decimated our logging industry. We can no longer log, and people have lost their livelihoods, and you know the story there. But this is a children's book, keep in mind. Now this one's especially egregious because it shows God, and there's little storks and children, and there's, I guess, greenhouse gases. I guess that's what they want us to think, that there's too many people, too many cars, and so God is fretting. And on the next page it says, and you can't read this, but it says, the planet groans every time it registers another birth.
Whoa.
And throughout this lovely children's book are terrible poems and things about death, dying, and overpopulation, and, you know, that kind of thing. So this is what our kids are being taught. There are children today that wish that people weren't alive. So their motto is think global and act locally. And basically California comes down to, and in our country, we've created a shadow government. You know, we have a system of government, federal, state, and local, and it's being usurped. It's been, it still exists, the people still hold office, but we've got this whole other system that's in place where now we have no way to, our system is broken, and especially in California. We have a 2/3 majority. I don't need to tell you guys that, you know, there's nothing that we can really do at the state capitol. And I'm not saying this is a left issue or right issue. I'm just saying that there are no checks and balances in California anymore. So there's no way to introduce a bill to stop what's happening or, you know, change things. We are on a trajectory. But international policies for climate change, land use, building codes. I mean, we've got international policies in our local general plans now. And those are coming from international bodies like ICLEI, the International Council for Local and Environmental Initiatives. We're getting international policies introduced through the EPA for climate change, the Department of Fish and Game. I mean, this is happening through executive order, and it's filtering down. In California, we've now got super councils like the California Air Resource Board that the Assembly can't even audit. I don't know if you guys know Shannon Grove from Kern County, but one of our, you know, she basically just said, you know, they are rogue. We're not allowed to audit this body. They've incorporated in Delaware, so there's no Open Meetings Act that applies to them. I mean, this is a problem. We have these very, very powerful super councils. Now, I remember, I guess it's 2 years ago almost now, that, you know, the whole budget crises thing, before we went over the cliff, a couple of years ago, they were fighting about it, and what did they do? The answer back then, during the summer, was to create a super council. That super council was supposed to override Congress and come up with a plan. They still haven't passed it. They still didn't pass it, But that council never went away. So the whole point was to create a council that overrides Congress that never goes away. And we're creating a whole another shadow government. We've done that with the CARB board, the Strategic Growth Council. We've got all kinds of state level bodies now in California, boards, bodies, and commissions that are unaccountable. We didn't vote for them. They're not part of our system of government. And they're basically dictating what's happening. Now, we still have state level representation, but it's starting to become clear that, you know, we've created this monster, and it's very difficult to get out of it. At the regional level, and this is where a lot of the damage is coming from, there's these regional COGs, the Council of Governments, these Metropolitan Transportation Commissions and Councils of Governments are unelected bodies that are controlling and dictating to local cities and counties what to do and how to grow, land use policies, etc. Now, the local cities don't technically have to go along, but if they don't get their transportation funds. Funds are withheld. So in my area, it's ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. ABAG was formed in 1960. It's a voluntary organization. Cities pay dues to belong to that group. They can stop paying dues and disassociate anytime they want. But it started as a loose-knit organization that several cities formed so that they could clean up the bay. That was the whole idea. We're going to create a club and clean up the bay. And it's morphed into this body that is controlling 9 Bay Area counties, 101 cities, and telling all of us how we're going to grow, how many units of housing we're going to have, what they're going to look like. I mean, that's basically what's happening. And our local cities are either going to go along or they're not going to get their funds. And there's $277 billion in federal grant money that's being handed down. So money and power is being focused at a higher and higher level. These unelected boards, bodies, and commissions are getting funding from federal grant money, state level stuff. They also took away our redevelopment last year. Remember that? Everybody cheered redevelopment was gone. Well, it wasn't gone, right? I was up at the state capitol the day that they were voting on that, or the day that it was abolished. And I'm like, okay, Jerry Brown would not be taking away redevelopment. Something's up here. And it's true, because what they did is they took it away from the cities and counties, they took it away at the local level, only to reconstitute it at a higher level and hand it down. So it's still there, it's just now power and money at a higher and higher level. Now, in addition to all of this, we have NGOs and stakeholder groups that are, involving themselves in our system of government to such a point where we, the taxpayers, we don't have a say anymore. We've got the Greenbelt Alliance and the Sierra Club and Transform California and the Bicycle Coalition and everybody and anybody who wants to make a decision about how your town is going to grow other than you. Because you're too busy because you're working. And we're the last people that get notified. So when these plans are made, these groups and stakeholder groups are involved in the process, and we find out about it when it's too late.